Hello, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
I see you get your Ember mug.
Yeah, well, I couldn't find my clean Yeti mug, so I took this Ember.
How do you like the Ember?
It's okay. I think if you put hot liquid in
It keeps it hot.
in a mug that's supposed to keep it hot, I don't need to have some sort of electricity to keep it hot, right? So it's just using it as a backup.
The Yeti definitely keeps it hot for a very long time.
Yeah, I have the small Ember. That's just a coffee mug.
Oh yeah,
I use that at home. Yeah. That's cool because if you just want to sit down in a chair.
Yeah, I like that.
How are you guys doing?
Oh, good. Thanks for the product review.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Ember, send us some free stuff.
Yeah.
So, what do we want to talk about today? Freestyle Friday.
Freestyle Friday.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Brad had some advertising issues that we're gonna break down today.
Yeah, we're gonna help him with some ad issues.
Help him, because the rest of us haven't figured out. So,
let's as long as we don't get jiggy with it.
Okay.
Well, that's timely.
Yeah, I know. So, anyways, yeah, you guys, geez, one of our clients is kind of in that space a little bit. So, we're always keeping up on which. That's a school, and they win a lot of awards. So one of their alumni won an Oscar this year again. So we're always up on what's going on in the Oscars.
Did he get slapped?
So no, it was a she. It was Jessica Chastain. She won an Oscar, and she's an alumni of the school. So I kind of keep up with that world a little bit, even though I don't know. It's one of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of your client, before we turned record on, I think we talked a little bit about advertising and the struggles that digital marketers are running into lately. Some of us, for sure.
Let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
We always talk about a lot of our struggles. So for those of you, behind the scenes, we sit around and we just kind of talk about some of the challenges that we face and what our topics, and when we're looking at topics. And one of the topics that I think we've definitely talked about it a lot on past episodes. Is just this idea of what do you do when platforms start to take away abilities to market to certain audiences that you relied on for clients, whether, and one of our clients spends a lot of time, they're higher ed, so they spend a lot of time trying to, a lot of their new students come out of high school. And so trying to market in a lot of the platforms now with the, especially with the iOS 14 update that happened last year in privacy laws, which I'm completely not against, but they limit the option for us to actually market to younger folks specifically that that we can dial in audiences. So we know, for instance, they have an affinity toward something. So they've taken a lot of that away. In fact, they're taking even more and more away just with the regular folks of audiences. We're finding that, for instance, on Meta, I got to use Meta now. I always say Facebook and Instagram, but I guess I can say Meta. Can I say Meta? Do people know what that is now?
Under the Meta umbrella, Facebook is still Facebook.
Yes,
Facebook that's right. Facebook. Yeah. So Facebook and Instagram and that platform in general, we're finding that a lot of our key audiences that we've used to market for years now are being taken it seems like every week. One of our major audiences is, our custom audiences are being removed, and we don't know why. They don't tell us, but it's becoming harder and harder now. And so what do you do when some of your audiences, those platforms, whether it's TikTok or whatever platform they're on, there's really not a lot of other options. What are the things that you do as a marketer, and how do you you have to kind of go old school at times and start to think out of the box and stuff. So I'd like to unpack that a little bit because it's becoming more and more of a challenge, I think, especially, and maybe it's just because of laziness, because you've spent so much time something worked so well that you put a lot of eggs in that basket. And how do you now diversify your mix, and where do you think out of the box and stuff? And I know, Bob, you specifically, I think if I look at you, you're like a very diverse marketer, meaning you don't put all of your eggs in one basket, and you're even if you see a lot of return on investment, that there's other things you need to invest into even in the future for your customer that may not get returns for a year or two, but you're building upon something that will have more of a lasting outcome.
Yeah. Well, I guess just because I'm old and I've lived this story before, and
Wait a second, I'm old too.
yeah, you are too,
but
and you've lived this
my
story.
problem?
Yeah, it's just relying on platforms, and we've talked about this at 5x5 Agency. We're going more into TikTok. Definitely, there's some cool things that are happening there. There's some availability, some good art targeting availability.
Yeah.
So I would definitely look into that. But also, there's a lot of other platforms. Like, for instance, we have a client that markets to a specific demographic that we use Nextdoor. The Nextdoor app and program that you can only. It's for neighborhoods, right? And you have to respond via a mailer to verify your address. So it's very targeted, and they know exactly who lives where. And so they have some really good targeting there. So if you want to go more kind of geo and demographic age, you can do that. We're also looking at Zillow they have in-stream in-feed ads. So for movers, and that you can do some interesting things with that. People that are looking to move, or people moving from, or people that have purchased recently. But at the end of the day, one of the things, again, that we keep going back to is first-party data. Is you just have to kind of just shift your whole mindset. Instead of, I think the natural thing is, okay, what are we going to replace Facebook with? Like, what's the new lever? Versus, well, maybe I just need to look at it from a different angle and say, okay, so this client of yours, can we put together, how do we build a cell phone list? How do we build an email list and start creating maybe more sophisticated drip campaigns, funnels for email, look at content marketing? Like, maybe we need to really seriously dig into the SEO and SEM world and really understand that better. And then, of course, Google search, obviously, that's intent-based, is still fairly strong, but it's not as easy as it used to be. What do you think, Ken?
Man, you're the guru with that stuff. I think you're totally right with that. I encourage. So we're not in the same space as you, like where we have a certain. Like, I think the younger audience is a harder audience, right? Because it gets hit harder, and they have less inputs.
You'll have less access to it.
Yeah, less access. Yeah. And the challenge with for instance, a 17-year-old marketing to a 17-year-old, we're not looking for all 17-year-olds. We're looking for those who have strong affinity to a very niche thing. So, and you can't, like, as an adult, you can target an adult by household income, and they have a lot more purchasing data. So that typically there's more affinity. There's more characteristics of a user that the platforms understand with their affinity and their purchasing behaviors and all that stuff that they use with their data. Where like a 17-year-old is kind of fresh, like they live underneath their parents' house and they're not, or wherever, right? And they're not, like, there's no data on them, which I'm not.
Yeah,
I have a 15-year-old and I have a 19-year-old, so I'm not a big fan of these platforms collecting data on young people.
Right, exactly.
So I'm not, like, saying that I don't blame them, and I think in general privacy is good, but as a marketer, you kind of got to go, well, you want to be where they're hanging out at some level, and if you can't position yourself, they're not watching TV. There's a lot more platforms, YouTube and other things that you can,
I was going to
spend a lot more energy on. And
I was going to say the same thing. Like, so what I'm encouraging and what I'm doing is diversifying in every way. And we've been probably beating on that drum with our clients for 2+ years, and we've talked about it here, like the idea that I asked the question, like, what if Facebook was taken away tomorrow? Like, what would your business look like? And if it's devastation, then you've got no choice, but we've got to figure out other channels, right? We've got to invest in other channels. And a lot of my thinking comes back to, well, what happened? What was it like before Facebook? Right? Like, people still, so now so there are other channels now, like you mentioned, like YouTube is one. Obviously, there's a lot of metaverse advertising, which is it's still new, but like you can do that kind of stuff. There is content, and there's TV, even
streaming,
you know, that kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are areas. I think the other thing I do is like I ask myself, like, what was it like before Facebook, and what how did advertising get done to get into certain places? I know, you know, when, you know, for instance, like when I was in high school, looking at what college to go to, you know, there are job fairs, and like they essentially advertise through the high school, right? And that's more of a, I mean, it's a lot harder, right? It's like a lot more grassroots, but it was done and it works. I think the challenge is that what you're probably really getting to is like there's nothing as easy. Right. Not that that's lazy, but like we've almost, the reason I say that is like, correct me if I'm wrong, like we've been conditioned, we being the businesses and even the agencies, we've been conditioned around, okay, here's where we can go to get these people. And I think the challenge is, especially as agencies, and for businesses, like to go outside of that, it's not easy. And that means that it costs a lot more.
Yeah.
I mean, in time, right? So like you can't charge the same as an agency if you're going to go grassroots to high schools and do TV ads and all those kind of things.
Yeah, hindsight's kind of 2020, I think. And
yeah,
I think the challenge is that, let's just say, you know, this is just I'm just making these numbers up, but let's say your client had $100,000 and they said, I want you to get me as many qualified leads as possible for this $100,000. You're going to put money where you're going to get the best quality lead for the cheapest amount. But the challenge is, once you do that for 5 years,
right,
and all of a sudden the drip stops, you know, and you haven't diversified, then all of a sudden you don't know where to diversify, or the cost of entry now to go into another platform is you're going to have twice the cost with half as much leads. You're still having a deficit, and that deficit, you know, can be felt. And especially when you're relying on platforms that can turn off the switch and you know, literally without telling you, basically, right, or give you just a month warning or something, you know, so it's so reliant. So I think the key, you know, I look at this kind of like a financial investment. It's like, you know, financially, you'd want to diversify your investments, right? And there's a reason for that, because the economy changes pretty quickly. So you can go into, you know, inflation hits hard quickly, and recessions start pretty quickly, and you want to be prepared, you know, for those times. But I think, you know, some of the lessons that I'm learning, especially even now at my age and my experience, is that you need to understand that nothing lasts forever, and don't be surprised if the rug is pulled from underneath you quickly, that you need to be ready for that.
Yeah.
And you need to spend money in areas where there's leads, but they're going to be a little more expensive. That way, if one channel gets shut down, that channel is still bringing in leads. Now, maybe not as much and not for the same price, but diversification, long-term evergreen investments. You know, Bob, you always really push, you know, content. A lot of content marketing, especially evergreen content marketing, thought leadership, those kind of things, which I think have a lot of evergreen results to it. Now, sometimes those are harder to measure, and it's kind of more branding than direct response.
Right.
But
I think it becomes more branding than direct response.
Well, and that's the key, is that you might have to, you know, early on in my career, we spent probably, if you had a campaign that was 50% branding, 50% direct response, even in the direct response world, it was very difficult to completely measure the results, even when you were doing advertising that had more of a direct response or call to action that was actionable. And so it was the measuring. What happens even with me is that data is like a drug. And so when you
Right.
see the data now with more modern marketing and advertising, when you see the data, you know exactly what's working and how and
Right.
why. And so you rely on that data. And then, when the data is shut down, then you kind of go back to going, okay, we're just going to lob a bunch of stuff out there and hope that it works. We'll see if it works, but there's a lag in that. And that's a challenge is marketing. When you have lagging data in marketing, you can't adjust because you're only waiting to see at the end whether or not it did well or not.
Yeah.
And then you make adjustments for the next round.
Yeah, I would predict, and I just in the context of this discussion, is that there's three areas we'll see grow considerably in the next couple of years. The first one is good old traditional email. I think we'll see a huge resurgence of that. Email marketing strategies. I think the second one will be cell phone, direct to smartphone marketing. I think we'll see a lot of companies pop up around that. And then third, I think we'll see some interesting developments in the world of programmatic advertising. Already there's a couple of self-serve, do-it-yourself, smaller, accessible programmatic. And programmatic advertising used to be the domain of the big ad agencies and the big companies. But in a nutshell, programmatic advertising is what we are losing, meaning massive databases that have all kinds of demographic and psychographic information that are legally attained, meaning credit databases, opt-in type databases, finance databases, that when you do things that sometimes we don't even realize it, we check boxes and say yes when we get mortgages on our homes, when we buy cars, on and on it goes. But there's a ton of data out there to run display digital ads on. And you don't have to, and some of them have very small minimum entries. So I think you'll see those three things, those three industries really kind of resurge. And the last one, programmatic, become more accessible to the everyday person, whereas it hasn't been in the past.
Yeah. Just on a side note, for some of our clients that had a lot of lead data or leads that came in, but they didn't have a lot of extra data on them. I mean, there's resources where you can match your data to consumer data and actually get a real match, and you can get a lot more information on your leads, or even if they're customers of yours. Let's say you own a software company and you have millions of users on a SaaS product or something like that, where you just don't have all that information. You can get more information on them, that if you wanted to segment your leads into, more viable potential customers, you can get that data. We've done that before too. It's an amazing amount of data you can get on somebody. And it works well when you're dealing with a consumer, someone who's an adult who's had a purchasing or history. You can even get to the point where you know what their political affiliation is.
Right.
It's pretty
That's
remarkable.
all public knowledge.
Yeah,
right?
It's pretty remarkable how much data you can actually get on somebody if you want, that can help with your marketing. It's all legal data, but but there are still those audiences that are still really hard to reach. And I think, if we're Coca-Cola, it's a very general audience. I can market more generally to an audience because almost everyone out there would probably be a customer of mine. But when you're dealing with a very niche customer, or let's say you sell a medical device in a specific type of surgeon, or something that you want to market to, it becomes tougher for sure. And
I would say too, don't count out retargeting. That's still available.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think being a lot more creative and intentional and thoughtful with retargeting strategies. So Facebook, Google, you can still retarget on that just like you always could.
One of the things that we're testing out is the ability to, so let's say you get a web visitor and you don't know who that person is, and they haven't given you any information, where we're acquiring IP addresses and trying to find local and taking that IP address and doing an address lookup, and then automating direct mail to that folks. It just says to the household of, but and actually sending out like a direct mail piece
Yep.
to certain people who we know come back maybe multiple times to a certain page or a landing page that we know it's worth us triggering a direct mail piece out.
Absolutely.
Because that's more expensive, obviously. So trying to, look at your funnel and trying to say, okay, how do we spend the least amount of money, but find those folks who are more engaged and then start spending more and more money on that lead once we qualify them a little farther, even if we don't get their data, even if they don't give us their data, we can still reach them. So
I think with a lot of stuff that you mentioned, Bob, and even in my experience, it's like we're going quality over quantity with a lot of this, because with Facebook and other platforms like that, you could just like have massive audiences of people that you go after, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't have to work. I mean, you had to work hard. It wasn't easy, but like you didn't have to tailor messages that you thought were for specific tiny little audiences, and it's just a different mindset. But I think with everything we're talking about here, right? Like even direct mail and all these kind of things, it's really about like, it's not the volume of people, it's the maybe smaller number of high quality people and traffic and leads that you get, and really mining those. I think that's one thing that I think is a philosophy that you need, that I think businesses just need to think about right now. It's not, and we're doing that. We're doing outbound for several types of clients, even ourselves, in a certain way, and that's an interesting thing. It's typical outbound is like high volume. It's very, very low volume. It's very targeted and very direct, and that gets way better results in my experience than the high volume. The other thing is, I think, something that always works is if you elevate your brand. And so I'm thinking like a university, right? Like if they have a brand and they're known for something, they have a voice, and someone is like a spokesperson, persona. It's no different than the content marketing for anyone or your agency. Like what we do here at Medicake. We have a brand that we're trying to create. We have a voice that is out there, and a drum that we're beating. Theoretically to attract people that like that, right? And detract people that disagree with that. So you kind of polarize your audience. And I think with a lot of businesses, that always works, right? If you can get that through the right general channels, I think that works even better than direct response. It takes longer, but like over time, you have a personality and a brand that people get attracted to of a certain type. And I remember especially when I was going to college, like there were certain schools that were known for certain things. I know that's still the case today, but that may be the case for the top, all the known universities, but probably not the underneath the hood ones. So how do you get your brand out there and communicated? I think that's something that in my experience always works through any channel. It's just a matter of growing that over time.
And I think the other one we haven't mentioned is just throwing out different channels that are working is partnering with influencers. And I would say micro influencers. Obviously the big ones are, if you can afford them and it makes sense. But to me, like if you're trying to reach 17-year-old kids that are graduating from high school that like something specifically, go and find, the TikTokers or the Instagrammers that have, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 of those.
Yeah.
And just figure out, okay, what can we creatively do together?
Yeah.
Can I buy a couple of posts? Can you sponsor, can I sponsor something? Can you, if it's a product, can you do a review or an opening? It sounds simple, but that's really powerful because that's, you just have to do the work and lean in and find those people that match the demographic.
Yeah.
I've got someone that finds and actually sets up those interviews, and even will help, because some of those influencers, if they're the big ones, they have massive audiences, and it's like going on Oprah. It's the craziest, it's kind of the craziest thing where like you have to be ready. Like your live stream setup has to look good. It can't have it. So like there's this, because once you're on, like you can't mess it up. It's be like messing up Oprah in the Instagram world. But I do have somebody that I can probably connect you with if you're interested in that route. It'd be interesting to me because most of the time those people are doing product.
You got a guy?
I got a guy.
She's
a gal.
Oh, gal. I got a gal.
But most of those people are doing products and things like that. I don't know if I've ever. I mean, and I think this is where the opportunity is with any business, right? like how do you like I would in university would be very unique. I would imagine. In that perspective,
when you're dealing with certain organizations, they're very protective of what they, of who they want to share their brand with, because they don't know if this TikToker or whatever, or whoever, let's just say it's an influencer, if they really trust the influencer, like they're challenging, they're probably challenged, and I think all universities is letting students run a lot of their social, because they don't know that their student's not going to post something that doesn't align with what they want to do or whatever, right? Shows them partying or something, you know what I mean? And so they're like, they're not, and sometimes they're careful about aligning with certain folks. They don't know if they could hurt their reputation. So but so there is that as well as, but finding the right one I think the thing with influencer marketing is that the product has to feel kind of like them, so it feels organic, because you can tell when an influencer is promoting something that they would never use themselves or care about. It's completely against their own personality, and I don't think it doesn't feel as authentic,
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if there's, again, I think with universities, like I don't know that they have these. You don't see spokespeople.
Yeah, no, typically there's not.
But I mean, should there be?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, well, I think universities, if you look at higher ed marketing, it's kind of like where medical marketing, like healthcare marketing was like 10 years ago, where it was very conservative. And now you're seeing that healthcare marketers have to literally market themselves like Coca-Cola at times, or products, right? They have to do things that they have a spokesperson and they have a face and they have a stronger brand. And I think higher ed also has to, at some level, do that. It's just a matter of a trusted individual, because I think the thing is with most higher ed, they're really focused on strong diversity. And sometimes with product marketing, you tend to get a spokesperson, and sometimes that spokesperson isn't for everyone. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like there's a little bit of polarization to a lot of brands, or they might put some type of tone on top of their brand, like Slim Jims, who's kind of has its own tone and its own flavor, no pun intended. And you know what I mean? It's got kind of an attitude, and that attitude could be somewhat polarizing, but they want to do that. They, like you said, you want to kind of have your audience, right? This is who we serve this is who eats our product, and this is who we're marketing to.
Isn't the idea, just calling out the elephant, but isn't the idea of like being everything to everyone always the thing that makes you fail, right? Yeah,
but also they're accredited, so they could lose their accreditation if they're seen to be not that. So the challenge is
certain.
No, I'm not saying it's their fault. I just think that some of these places paint themselves into a really difficult corner,
And higher ed has. By their accreditation, they have to be careful about how there's rules of how they're promoting their school and their programs, so that they have to be very careful. So
we would love to hear from you listeners. I know that we had a little glitch with Spotify that we fixed, and we got all of our past episodes that were missing. Yep. So if you're listening to us and you've got some ideas on how to be more creative with your clients and digital ads, we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely.
So reach out to us. You can click on the podcast and email us, or just use hashtag Agency Exposed Podcast and we'll find you. But this has been a good discussion. I know we're on a little bit of a time crunch today, so we're going to end this one, but really packed with good info and questions. Hopefully, maybe Brad, we've helped. If not, at least we spent some time.
I feel so much better now.
Wasting
though.
air.
I got it out. I got it out in the open. No, we've been talking.
Hey,
about
it's it's about figuring it out.
That's right.
That's
You
right.
figure it out on your own.
All right, gentlemen. Until next time.
Appreciate you guys.
Talk
See
to you
ya.
soon.
Bye.